Be careful when you enter Big Sky Country. You might just encounter some big mysteries. Thank you for joining me for another special episode of Big Sky Mysteries. This episode is another true Montana story, researched and collected by Montana's very own Ellen Baumler. See the description below for more details. As some of you might be aware, I love cryptids, and I'm very happy to be able to narrate about Flathead Flossie. Who is Flossie, you may ask? Flossie is Montana's answer to the Loch Ness Monster. Didn't know Montana had a lake monster? Surprise! If you enjoy this episode, please hit that subscribe button and the notification button so you won't miss out on your next scary episode. Also, if you're looking for something seriously spooky or downright terrifying, check out more of my videos in the link above. Now, enjoy this true Montana cryptid story. Montana's Nessie, Flathead Flossie. Skeptics have explained the mysterious creature sighted in Montana's Flathead Lake as an overweight skin diver, a mother-in-law in a swimsuit, a sturgeon, a superfish, a prehistoric holdover, even a wayward seal. As unlikely as it may sound, however, the USO, unidentified swimming object, may not be a hoax. For well more than a century, reports of some kind of large creature in the third largest body of fresh water west of the Great Lakes has kept residents and tourists on the lookout, and sightings have been numerous. While most everyone from school age to senior citizen across the world knows about Scotland's Nessie of Loch Ness Lake, similar sightings in other places have not received such worldwide publicity. There are, in fact, many tales about cold, deep, freshwater lakes and sightings of creatures in them. In theory, these lakes could support creatures of very large size. Lake Champlain between New York and Vermont in the United States has its champ, and in Canada, sightings of Ogopogo in Okanagan Lake in British Columbia date back to the 1800s. Manipogo of Lake Manitoba is another. There have been sightings of a creature in Utah's Bear Lake as well. Even Brigham Young believed in that creature, described as an undulating body of light cream color more than 30 feet long. Montana's version reputedly lurks in the deep waters of Flathead Lake, a body of water that covers some 189 square miles. The lake is 28 miles long, 10 miles wide, and more than 120 feet deep. Until the mid-1880s, settlement of this remote northwestern region lagged behind the rest of Montana Territory because travel there was so difficult. The advent of the Northern Pacific across Montana in 1883 made access more feasible. Beginning in 1885, steamboats plied the waters of Flathead Lake, carrying goods and passengers between Polson and Demersville, the early settlement that later relocated to become present-day Kalispell. In 1887, settlers and visitors to the Flathead Lake country took the Northern Pacific to Ravalli, where stages left 3 times weekly. The stage carried the earliest passengers to the little steamer U.S. Grant, a converted sailboat. Equipped with an upright boiler, also known as a donkey engine, and a screw-type propeller, the U.S. Grant's pilot was Captain James C. Kerr, a veteran of the Great Lakes. Captain Kerr skippered Flathead steamers from 1886 until his death at the helm of the Klondike in 1909. It was aboard the U.S. Grant that Captain Kerr made the first recorded sighting of the mysterious creature in Flathead Lake. In 1889, he and his startled passengers saw a 20-foot object swimming directly in the steamer's path. Passengers began to panic, and one man aimed his rifle at the object, fired, and missed. The creature disappeared. Thus began the epic of Montana's own lake monster. Since that first incident shocked those aboard the U.S. Grant, two kinds of sightings have produced two different mysteries. One sighting is that of a huge fish, and the other is of a serpent-like creature. In the first kind of report, observers seem to describe a kind of sturgeon. Old-timers recall Indians of the lake country who told of sighting what they called superfish. Experience related by both the Salish and the Kootenai suggests that, historically, sturgeon existed in Flathead Lake. A strong oral tradition in Kootenai songs and stories tells of a fish they called longnose. There are many reported sightings of sturgeon in Flathead Lake. In an oral interview conducted by his family in 1954, Flathead Lake pioneer Joe Zelezny told of an incident that occurred in 1899 while he spearfished by torchlight. Zelezny's homestead was north of what is today Rawlins, Montana, in a shallow bay. A carpenter and a homesteader, Zelezny often fished at night, taking large numbers of fish for the family table. On this particular evening, he had finished fishing when he saw something unusual. The object was large, maybe 10 or 12 feet, log-shaped, and lying in the lake on the bottom of a shallow bay area. Joe told his brother Henry to stick the object, handing him the spear. When Henry did so, it came shooting out of the water. It tore loose. It looked exactly like a sturgeon. It couldn't have been anything else. According to John Stroms of the Missoulian, Joe Zelezny was an honest homesteader who had no reason to promote the idea of the Flathead Monster, and nothing to gain. So his report, wrote Stroms, must be given considerable credence. In 1915, a school of sturgeon sighted near Plains in the Clark Fork River was reported heading toward the lake. The huge fish were 60 miles downstream from Flathead Lake and moving in that direction. Then, in 1920, commercial fishermen working on the lake discovered their nets ripped apart by something they assumed must have been a gigantic fish. The late C. Leslie Griffith took the superfish legend to a new level, claiming to have caught a 181-pound, 7.5-foot white sturgeon on May 28, 1955. Despite sworn testimony that Griffith hauled the superfish onto his boat off the west shore near Cromwell Island, skeptics dispute that there are any sturgeon in Flathead Lake. But no one has been able to disprove his claim. The fish has since been on display at the Polson Flathead Historic Museum. On September 2, 1960, bathers at the Polson swimming beach reported a creature with a head like a horse. Within a day or so, the Zieglers had their own experience. The family, who lived on the grounds of the Polson Country Club, heard large waves crashing and went to investigate. There were no boats in the area, but huge waves were breaking over the swimming pier and on the shore. At the end of the pier, the Zieglers saw something that appeared to be rubbing against the pilings as if scratching its back. Gilbert Ziegler, part-time deputy sheriff, city policeman, and summer groundskeeper at the country club, went to get his rifle. As Mrs. Ziegler moved closer to the pier to see what it was, it suddenly came out of the water. She said, "It was horrible looking, with a head about the size of a horse, and about a foot of neck showing." Was this sighting a sturgeon? A game warden explained that sturgeon, if that's what it was, could appear mammal-like because their mouths are on the underside of their frame and they have whisker-like feelers to boot. The Flathead Courier made a standing offer, $25 to anyone who could either take a picture of the big fish and submit it along with the negative, or make it possible for the paper to take a photograph. So, challenged the Courier, keep your cameras loaded and your eyes peeled. Fishermen near Big Fork at the northeastern end of the lake on August 26, 1961, saw something huge circle their boat and speed away when another boat approached. Others reported big fish swimming in schools, but no one snapped a photo. These superfish sightings are generally thought to be sturgeon, but that too is a mystery. If such fish do exist in Montana waters, experts believe that they are likely holdovers of glacial Lake Missoula or from the lower Columbia drainage that entered the lake before there were any dams. Freshwater sturgeon takes several decades to reach maturity and can live for over a century. The Kootenai white sturgeon is an isolated population, officially listed as endangered in 1994. The largest Kootenai River sturgeon weighed in at 200 pounds. There are 18 white sturgeon populations, but only the Kootenai sturgeon was naturally cut off from the lower Columbia River drainage during the last glacial period 10,000 years ago. It is a genetically unique population. There are only 30 miles of white sturgeon habitat in Montana's Kootenai River. Although experts say that Flathead Lake could support a limited population of sturgeon that survived from ages past, and environmental conditions in the upper Flathead River system are ideal for breeding, no hard proof, thus far, places white sturgeon in Flathead Lake. The second type of sighting is no sturgeon. Whatever the creature is, it and its offspring have been seen enough times, at least 53, for it to merit a name of its own. Flossie seems to fit well in company with other monsters like Nessie and Champ, and a name of its own gives the creature the distinction it deserves. Flossie has been consistently described since the first sighting in 1889. Black-brown in color and 20 to 40 feet in length, although this depends upon how much of the creature is visible at the time of the sighting. Witnesses describe a snake-like head, a body with vertical humps, and a tail tapered like that of an eel. In July 1962, a Polson housewife and some California tourists transversing the wood bridge across the Flathead River stopped midway and jumped out of their cars to get a better view of a black object. It was some 15 feet long, moving upstream through the lake outlet. It undulated in an up and down motion, then quickly gained momentum and moved into the main part of Flathead Lake. A few months later, on September 12, 1962, brothers Ronald and Maynard Nixon had a close encounter with a monster whose photos they had helped fake. They had regarded the sightings as a great joke and helped their mother rig some spectacular trick photos of it for tourists. But what the brothers saw 300 feet offshore as they drove along the Polson waterfront made them believers. Ronald Nixon said, "It was moving straight away from the shore and fast enough so that the wave at the front was about 2 feet high. The wake at the back must have been at least 25 feet from the front, so the object must have been longer than that. It couldn't have been a sturgeon. I don't have any idea what it was." Several businessmen out for some fishing on a mild December day in 1962 also saw the creature. They were trolling in Big Arm Bay for lake trout when they suddenly saw what looked like a log pop up out of the water. It came from nowhere. They stopped the motor and watched it drift, then started the motor up again to get closer for a better look. As they did so, the thing disappeared as suddenly as it had surfaced, leaving quite a wake. Businessman George Darrow and his wife of Big Fork also saw the creature and long kept quiet for fear of ridicule. They later told of their 1971 experience. George recalled that as they sat on the deck of their West Lakeshore home, he saw 2, then 3 loops in the water, 100 yards offshore, moving parallel to the shoreline. The object was snake-like, serpent-like, and there was about 8 to 10 feet between loops. On May 25, 1985, trolling in Yellow Bay, retired Army Major George Coate and his son Neil saw an object as long as a telephone pole and twice as large in diameter. As the creature slowly swam with an undulating motion, they could see 4 to 6 humps above the water. It then sped away. At a distance of about 400 meters, it stopped and looked back, then disappeared underwater. They knew that no one would believe them, and so they kept quiet about it. Then, in 1987, Coate was driving along Old Highway 93 near Lakeside when he saw the creature again. This time, the creature was quivering as it swam in a forward motion. He saw the entire creature, head, body, and tail. Coate decided to come forward, detailing his 2 sightings in a letter to the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in 1990. Coate's descriptions reveal his Army training in observation. I counted 6 to 8 coils of its body on the surface, but couldn't see its tail because it was underwater. The Coates know what they saw, said George in his 1990 letter. The Major is a veteran fisherman who had fished the ocean, caught 1,000-pound tuna, and seen sturgeon. I have been out on Flathead Lake over 300 times in the last 15 years. I know what a submerged log looks like. There is no doubt in my mind that it was a huge creature. According to a 30-year veteran, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks fisheries biologist and expert on the Flathead sightings, Lainey Hansel, the 13 sightings reported in 1993 were the most in any given year, and one of those was the only report of 2 creatures. On May 24th, there were 2 creatures sighted swimming side by side in Big Arm Bay. One was larger than the other. In 6 of the 1993 sightings, witnesses described baitfish that seemed to be jumping out of the water to escape whatever it was. Hansel has seen neither monster nor sturgeon, but admits observing several unexplainable large-sized holes in the nets we pulled from the lake. Not all sightings lack explanation. One proved to be a horse swimming across the lake, and another a flock of birds packed together resembling a 20-foot log. In the 1940s, Los Angeles resident Frank T. Dwyer reported seeing a seal in the lake. "I know seals," Dwyer insisted. "We stopped, and I saw the seal jump from some large rocks and disappear into the water. A few minutes later, it was swimming near the shore. I learned there are not supposed to be seals in Flathead Lake, but I know definitely there is one there." There were other similar reports of a large mammal at this same time. Several years before, a seal from a traveling circus had indeed escaped into the lake. Mark Henkel reported in the Billings Gazette, September 6, 1998, that according to Tim Vajro, then Regional Fisheries Manager for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, of the 78 sightings on record from 1889 to 1994, 25 were of a superfish creature, and 53 reported as an eel-like object up to 60 feet long with humps and smooth skin. Credible witnesses include lifelong residents and tourists. The most likely places to catch a glimpse of Flossie seem to be in the vicinities of Skidoo Bay, Polson Bay, the Narrows, and along the West Shore Road. What is it that so many people have seen? Many believe there is definitely something to the sightings. Even Dorothy Johnson, renowned Montana author who hailed from Whitefish, believed there was something in the lake. In a letter to the then editor of the Flathead Courier, Paul Fugelberg, Johnson wrote, "I don't think that the monster should be done with tongue-in-cheek. You have eyewitness accounts by people who were scared and didn't think it was funny. I remember hearing about something in Flathead Lake more than 40 years ago, so don't give the Polson Chamber of Commerce credit for dreaming it up." Fugelberg, historian of Flathead Lake sightings, cataloged some 70 of them. He insists there's something out there. Visitor Services Bureau Chief Ken Soderberg of Montana State Parks related an incident that Fish, Wildlife, and Parks maintenance supervisor Merle Phillips shared with him a few years ago. Phillips and his crew were called to Wild Horse Island to dispose of a dead horse that was, as Soderberg puts it, making a bit of a stink. While sometimes in such situation the men will resort to dynamite, a nearby cabin made that solution unwise. The horse was stiff as a board and too big to load on the boat, so they built a raft of inflated inner tubes and boards intending to haul it across to shore. They lashed the horse to the boards, legs sticking straight up in the air, but they slightly miscalculated the weight of the horse. Once in the water, it partially submerged. The boat moved slowly, dragging the raft with its unusual cargo. Boats passing by gave the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks crew double takes as they saw what was tethered to the raft. Finally, one boat turned around, pulled alongside the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks craft, and the driver asked, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Phillips replied in all seriousness, "Mister, I would advise you to stay back from this official boat." The driver was taken aback. "Well, how come? What are you doing?" Phillips realized he had to come up with an answer. The look on the fellow's face was priceless when he heard Phillips's response. "We're trolling for the Flathead Lake Monster." Thanks again for joining me for my first true Montana cryptid story here at Big Sky Mysteries. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit that notification bell to know when your latest scary story is delivered. For more information on Ellen Baumler, please follow the links in the description below. Want to hear your true or fictional scary story narrated by me on this channel? See the description below for how to submit your story. Again, thanks for joining me. Hopefully this winter, submerged in the water in Flathead Lake, Flossie and her offspring are having a quiet time. But come spring and summer, they may be more active, and during your next visit to Flathead Lake, who knows? Maybe you might see an undulating mass moving towards you. It's just Flossie, maybe, wanting to say hi. I'll see you in your nightmares. Good night.